And welcome back to another episode of Detonation. We got a really cool one coming up. It's David Shumaker. He's here. He's ready. He's rocking and it's rolling. And we'll get all into that in 2 seconds. But I just have to make an announcement about the U.S. Transhumanist Party. The mega debate is about a week away. It's gonna be huge. I mean, you're coming on the show, right, David? I'll see you there, hopefully. But anyway, I don't know. I won't push you into that. But it's gonna be huge. We're gonna have lots of guests. We're gonna have Levin Jules. We're gonna have Peter Zing. We're gonna have hopefully a whole bunch of other people coming on to do that debate. So it's gonna be really, really fun. So next week, if you're in the USTP, get charged, get ready, get rock and roll, because that's gonna be good. If not, we'll have an update on when that is. But anyway, in the meantime, we have David Shumaker. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, Steele. Thanks so much for inviting me on the show. This is going to be a great experience.
Yeah, absolutely. You've probably seen all your friends here already, and now you're here, and that means that's really cool. This is the $10 million interview. That's what I'm calling this one.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, no, it's really good to have you here, and I've been excited to have you on for a while now, and it's going to be really interesting to see your perception. What is your background, sir? Who, what, when, where, why, how?
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I label myself a technologist, a futurist, an explorer, a transhumanist, and a cryonicist. Wow, that's a lot of stuff all in one area. That's a lot of stuff. But what it really comes down to is somebody that's curious, always looking forward to the future. And I've done that all my working life and in other pastimes as well. I spent 25 years in technology in the U.S. Air Force. And when I got done with that, I became a systems engineer doing IT infrastructure. So I was very fortunate. The first company that hired me helped me through all the certification and education process for that. And of course, that was back in the day when this was really a pretty hot topic. And it was really great, really new, cutting edge, exciting. That looked forward to the future, that looked forward to exploring. I hadn't found transhumanists yet. But when I did find transhumanism, it kind of just all made sense. So I've been doing the system engineering and working in supporting technical roles in that area now for just coming on 20 years.
Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, and transhumanism does make a lot of sense, actually. It's all about science and technology and progress and the ethical applications of technology. And it's interesting that someone like Ray Kurzweil, who was an inventor, jumped on board that sort of theme, because once you're open to the understanding, once you get into that frame of mind where things can come out of existence, it's like Steve Jobs says, put a dent in the universe, because you can see that the whole world is something to be played with. Once you get into that frame of mind, there's unlimited potential there on both the negative and the positive side. And transhumanism is trying to say, let's eliminate the negatives and let's push it towards positive outcomes. You're in the aircraft field. From the dodgy days of the Wright brothers, to now, aircraft has become one of the safest. The aviation industry is one of the safest industries. I mean, people don't fret much about getting on an aircraft even after tragic events like 9/11, because they're a blimp in the radar of what technology can do. You're sitting in a whole technological machine, from the software that helped run it to the pilots that are trained to the actual machine itself, which has had only 100 years of evolution.
Isn't that incredible? With the picture that you see behind me, by the way, that's a good example. That's a picture of a DC-3, and it sits over the top of my couch. And you might ask what DC-3 has to do with science, technology, and transhumanism. But a DC-3 was the aircraft that made commercial aviation possible. Up until that point, it was all experimentation. It was perhaps maybe for the rich, something along that line. When the DC-3 came along, it became affordable for more of the average people. And now everybody takes an airplane, as you say. And the safety record is wonderful on the air, on the ground. And it all started with that. And I fell in love with the DC-3 many years ago. And when I was in an art shop and saw that, that's just something that just had to hang in my place.
Yeah,
So right in line with what you're saying.
Yeah, that's really cool. The DC-3. That's like what, like 1930s, 1940s, something.
Exactly. And I don't know what the current stats are. I didn't think to look them up, but a few years ago I looked it up, and there were still quite a few in service after all these years. So it's had a very, very long life. And that also goes towards the kind of things that we're looking at as far as from science and engineering standpoint is concerned.
Absolutely. You know, if you can make a machine, a DC-3, for example, or a car, or a motorcycle, or a piece of jewelry, last by swapping out its components, I mean, why can't you extend that idea to the human body? Why can't you swap out your old components or older components for new, reprinted components, beautifully young pre-printed components? The human body is sort of like an engineering marvel in a way. It's a much more complicated marvel than some machines. Not all machines, but some machines, definitely. I mean, the ISS would give the human body a run for its money in terms of its complexity. But absolutely. I mean, this is the notion. We're taking control of our own evolutionary stance, and if we don't take control of our own evolutionary stance, we'll lose control of our evolutionary capacity, because something else that's smarter than us that we created will just do it for us.
Well, yeah, that's absolutely right. You mentioned Ray Kurzweil earlier, and another one of my heroes is Aubrey de Grey. And when you talk about the repair model, that's something that he speaks about quite often, and he uses a car as an example. You can have that 100-year-old collectible car, and it can be in perfect shape, as good or maybe even perhaps better than the day that it came off Henry Ford's assembly line. And it's not a matter of some magic or anything else. It's a matter of understanding how the mechanisms work and then applying the proper maintenance to keep them running. So you're exactly right. That's the perfect analogy for the body. But tying into Ray Kurzweil, I love his approach on the three bridges to extremely long life, immortality, if you will. And I fully subscribe to those. I didn't say how I came to transhumanism, but going on almost 4 years ago now, actually maybe more than 4 years ago, I ran into somebody who introduced me to something that hadn't happened yet called RadFest, and that would have been back in 2016. And the first RadFest had not happened yet. It happened later that year in August in San Diego. And Ray Kurzweil was one of the speakers there by way of a robot. He addressed the crowd in a very 21st century fashion. I'd done some reading prior to that, became really, really interested in the things that he had to say. And his slogan of live long enough to live forever plays, I think, right into the repair model. I'm on bridge one, taking my supplements, going to the gym, getting my sleep, getting my exercise, getting tested regularly to see where I'm at, and taking quick action to keep myself as healthy as I can for as long as I can. And then starting to employ bridge two. Some technologies that I just heard of as rather fanciful a few years ago are starting to hit the mainstream now. Stem cell technology being one of them. And I had stem cell injections myself here a little more than a year ago for a condition that I had. That would not have been possible, say, 4 or 5 years ago to be able to do that. So Bridge 2 is the start of those kind of technologies. And then I'm very anxious to see where nanotechnology, which is in its infancy now, is going to go for the future. So I think this whole idea of radical life extension, or RLE for short, is something that previous generations have not been able to really think about from a scientific standpoint, from possibility. But when you read great authors like Kurzweil and you look at his track record for predictions, and then you look at the things that he's talking about now, and you see somebody like Aubrey de Grey that's worked in this area for years, and the projects that the SENS Foundation and so forth are promoting, it's just absolutely amazing. I am very, very happy to be talking to people about this. So because of that, I've been to all three Rad Fests that have occurred so far. I've been a volunteer at one of them. I have a sideline business that's we actually were the Wi-Fi sponsor for at Rad Fest last year. So we provided free Wi-Fi for people in the main assembly area and then over in the vendors area. I got a little plug for my company, but it was a great honor to be able to do that. And I'm signed up to go there and to be there this year and to be fully engaged. Radfest has been very instrumental in my transition to humanism. It's where I first came in contact with people that had that view, and I became fascinated.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and it's frustrating from this angle, to hear this, because I'll have to invent my own Radfest to get Radfest to Australia, so I don't have to pay $1 million every time I want to go to the United States to go to Radfest. So if you're in the United States and you're hearing this, or if you're in the United States and you have access to People Unlimited and you live around the corner and you don't go, you're shooting yourself in the foot, because there's people all around the world who can't access it, or it would take a lot of money, time, and investment and planning to access these great, wonderful, organizations and speakers and things, and they're right around the corner from you, but I know that the Radfest is filling up. I know that People Unlimited, Jim Stroll. Have you had a chance to meet Jim Stroll yet?
Oh yes, I know Jim Stroll quite well.
Good.
And I spent time going to People Unlimited for a few years, and I see Jim Stroll at transhumanist events and so forth. I just saw him in Burbank at an event that was put on by the California Transhumanist Party. Great individual, and he has a passion for this that is just infectious. If you ever get a chance to listen to him, please do.
Yeah, that's what I would say as well. I'd say he's one of the great, inspirational figures, and he's been through the drought and he's come out on the other side. He's been doing this sort of, work since the 1960s or 1970s, and he's pushed on through all of the hardships and all of and everything up until now, and he's just starting to see it flourish before his eyes, and I think that's really good. I mean, it's nice to see somebody that dedicated and that forward thinking get rewarded for a lifetime's of work. But utilize it. If you're in the United States, utilize it. Go to Radfest, go to People Unlimited, go to the Church of Perpetual Life, go to these things, join the USTP, do all these things, and it'll only benefit you and your children and your country and whatever else you want to conceive. It's a benefit to you. It's a net benefit. You can't really lose. The only way you can lose is by not engaging, and then letting the bad people jump on board or hijack, and that's how you lose. You lose by disengagement.
That's how you lose. Yeah, that's exactly right. And let me say one thing too, that there are quite a few international people that do come to Radfest. I enjoy meeting new people each and every year and finding out where they're from and discussing what their background is, and it's fascinating. And then stay in contact with them on Facebook. Facebook's a wonderful way to do that. There's somebody that I've met, and maybe they don't come every year. Well, like for example, I'll throw out a challenge, okay? My partner, she is from Auckland, New Zealand. So we go every other year. Why not invest in yourself? I go to Auckland, New Zealand to see family, and I go to Auckland, New Zealand for a little business. But also, come to Radfest. Maybe once, maybe every other year, maybe every third year. Come one time. I suggest that if you come one time, you're going to want to come again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's amazing like that. And yeah, international participants. Someone as important as Jose Cordero, who's come on this show. That's fantastic. I mean, he's a living legend essentially. His
Yes.
resume is too long to explain and go into. He's a fundamental player in global politics essentially. Kurzweil. I mean, that's Google. I mean, there's a whole bunch of cool stuff. Anyway, it's cool. I hope I'll get over there ASAP. Oh, Singularity U is the other one. Peter Diamandis.
Yes.
With that, we've got that going on here right now in Sydney. That's through Peter Zing and his transhumanist Australia stuff. And yeah, that's fantastic as well. I mean, Singularity U is also really good. It concentrates very heavily on technology, the technological advancements, robotics, cybernetics, a whole bunch of cool stuff. But it's the same sort of thing. It's a very positive environment. And they're trying to establish that the public needs to wake up to set up safeguards for some of these technologies and channel these in a non what's that movie, the one I never watched, Terminator,
Oh,
non-Terminator direction.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't watch that movie. I think that it presents probably the worst side of the future that we could look forward to.
Yeah,
But,
I'm not a fan of movies in general. I don't watch many movies, so movie talk doesn't really interest me very much. But I like reading books and stuff. But I know it's the dystopian one.
Yeah, it is. However, it does start conversation.
Mm.
And I think to your point, I think we do need to talk about ethics, morality around these issues. We also need to talk about the possibility of the science and the engineering, especially as it applies to health. And even a movie like Terminator, when I tell somebody that I'm interested in radical life extension, I'm interested in techno-positive future, usually that movie comes up. And there can be some great talking points in that as far as, that's a Hollywood drama. But let's learn from these things. Let's move forward. Let's take a look at the technologies that are coming our way. And then let's start having these conversations about what we should be doing with them and how they should be used in society. And let's start talking about them before they get here. Because with the acceleration of science and technology right now, it's too late to talk about them after they arrive.
Absolutely, and I appreciate you coming on this show and supporting that cause, because you can understand what's going on here. So that's fundamental, and I thank you for that. You're an Alcor member. Why are you involved with Alcor?
Well, I was involved with Alcor because I was exposed to it. Now, back in the 70s, I think it's probably the first time that I heard about cryonics, and that seemed like sci-fi to me back then. And back in the 70s, the science and the technology were altogether different. But as I progressed in my engineering career, and as I started seeing enhancements, as I started seeing upgrades, as I started seeing how things are miniaturized and moved forward, essentially progress in all of those areas in the area that I'm working in. Then I started looking at life sciences, especially when I became exposed to RADFest and the Coalition for Radical Life Extension and People Unlimited. And I thought, so where is this going to take us forward? So I too like to read, and I spent a lot of time reading books on this. I've read Kurzweil's books. I've read Aubrey de Grey's book. I've read David Wood's latest book. I've read quite a few. But anyway, the point is, all of that inspired me to say that what I'd seen in my part of the technological world is now moving into biology. It's now moving into gene therapy. It's now moving into all of these things. And those are great. And those are all moving at an accelerated rate. Also, improvements in cryonics, improvements in the vertification process, improvements in the legal aspects, even the non-technical aspects have all moved forward. So I see a convergence there. I have made the decision that I'm going to do whatever is within my power to see, to experience as much of the future as I can. So another 50 years, another 100 years, another 200 years, another 500 years, whatever that might be. And I want to take advantage of everything. So I'd already mentioned about taking advantage of Ray Kurzweil's three bridges and taking that seriously, and looking at the repair model from Aubrey de Grey, and looking at so many things from others. But also, I have to ask myself, I'm attempting to do something, live healthy and strong past 125, hopefully way past 125. And to do that, I must be honest and say, nobody's ever done that before. There are no documented cases to that being done. So if I'm going to go do something that's never been done before, I am going to approach this like an engineering project. I'm going to put all my money, my main money, into the project itself, and then I'm going to look at what can go wrong. And I'm going to put money into those things. And when you get down far enough on the list, cryonics is a good safety net. I remember as a kid going to the circus, and I loved the high wire acts at the circus. And one of the things that impressed me was seeing these people do these fantastic stunts high above the circus tent floor, and in most cases, no net. But they've done those practices over and over and over, and they had that down to where it was almost impossible for them to make a mistake. Sure, they could, and there was that tension, and that's what drove the drama of watching it. But you know, when they practiced, when they did that the first time, when they got a new trick and they wanted to do that the first time, I'm sure they had a safety net, and I have a safety net too.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And the curve eventually goes vertical. So is a big question mark is there as to it's almost a guarantee in a way. I mean, but it's about these ethical, it's about laws, it's about directional focus, it's about human tensions, it's about getting all this other stuff down and out, and it's getting the idea. This is why the USTP is so important, their platform, etc. Because if you're just running off this idea off the US Constitution or the main talking points, you want to be unfrozen, and they're talking about the economy. You know what I mean?
Right.
We've got to change the conversation. You've got to change Washington. You've got to change London. You've got to change Moscow. You've got to change the main debates. And the debates that we're having on this show, and the debates that are going on between people like Elon Musk and Jack Ma, or Bill Gates and some other one, we're all having the same conversation, and we're all saying that politicians need to start having the same conversation. The billionaires and debt nation people, we're all having the same conversation, but there's no, and if the people don't have the conversation and they don't demand that the conversation changes from politicians aren't going to change the conversation. It's not going to happen. And then the worst fear of the elites hoarding technology and abuse and other bad things that could happen, that starts to become a reality, because there's no check on the politicians. There's no public pressure, etc. So what incentive is there to change anything? So the longer that we don't change the conversation, the more and more these politicians, these bureaucrats in Washington, will try and suppress the conversation and get away with it. The only reason they can't is because the people who are interested in this have a lot of power and money, and they can sort of force it a little bit by the definition of who they are. But that doesn't change the general narrative, and it has to be a bottom-up push, and that's going to be an incredibly hard uphill battle, I think, to get, because the politicians, they can just turn the screws on social, economic, political, and other things, and change the debate at a whim. And if people are worried about short-term issues, about putting food on the table, about some random war somewhere, some other things, if they're worried about these things, then that will be the talking point for the day. That will be the talking point for that year. It's now 2050. and they're still talking about that. You know, it's horrible, and it's been going on for, I don't know, as long as I've been alive.
And for me as well. However, I do see hope. I am an optimist, by the way, and I think
Me
I
too.
have good reasons for that because I see many of the optimistic things that I started dreaming about the future at 10 years old and started making lists of things that I wanted to see and so forth. So here I am, a 10-year-old in elementary school, not exactly a position of power, but that's where I learned that by talking to people, engaging in conversations, you can make this all different. And I've seen other people engage in conversations. And what you're doing here on shows like Detonation are absolutely perfect because this is something that allows us to go out and talk about things that are not showing up on the 6 o'clock news. How do we get them on the 6 o'clock news? We do it by this. We do it by going to political events, non-political events, talking to people about these things that we think that are important, and gradually the conversation changes. I think a good example is on the Democratic Party ticket in this country, one of the candidates, Andrew Yang, which I'm sure many people know, he's the champion of the UBI.
Yep.
And he's talking about the UBI because of automation. And he's talking about automation based on driverless vehicles, especially truck drivers and that whole thing. And then we've had recent news here that UPS has been testing driverless vehicles. So it's not just something in the testing stages that aren't going to come to production. It's going to be something that's going to be a real value and it needs to be soon. But back to Andrew Yang, if other people hadn't been talking about UBI before this, I don't know we would be seeing that on the Democratic stage. So it's how we get things, I think, into the political spectrum.
And there's
go ahead.
Sorry, and there's different solutions on both sides of the aisle. Like you mentioned, this is. I just want to touch on this quickly before you change it because this is really important. Andrew Yang, he bringing the UBI on, and you know, someone with the biggest ratings is Tucker Carlson. And what's Tucker Carlson saying? He says basically, he does talk about it. He does talk about automation, but he approaches it from an interesting angle where he says we can't allow the trucks to be automated because the group that's going to be between 25 and 40, this huge number of employed peoples is going to lose their job, and imagine the social dislocation that's going to happen from that. But Tucker Carlson, that's just the beginning. That's just the beginning, Tucker. It's not just, you can't just say, all right, we have to legislate that these people drive trucks and you can't automate it, because that's just the beginning. What are you going to do? Legislate? You're going to legislate like going back to the Stone Age to protect jobs so that, you know, these people don't end up in an uprising? I mean, because he doesn't want to talk about UBI, right? It's socialist, communist garbage, right? So,
well, not really.
Well, that's what he's saying, right? It's socialist, communist.
I have a different opinion.
You can't have a welfare system, so legislate that automation is thrown out, basically.
Well, that's where the conversation needs to change, because I don't look at UBI as a welfare system at all. Welfare system is a needs-based system. UBI, that U stands for universal, of course, and that means everybody gets the UBI. And I know that's not something that some people fancy, because I think they are caught up in the welfare model. But the fact that it is universal means that it's universal for a purpose. He's calling it a freedom dividend, and that freedom dividend comes from living in and participating in this economy here in the United States and the things that we have done. That's not too dissimilar, as has been pointed out, I think, by Andrew Yang and others, as to what goes on in Alaska with their oil dividends and so forth that are up there. And that was signed into law, if I remember right, by a Republican governor. That doesn't sound like somebody that really wanted to sign a welfare bill. And it's not a welfare bill, and neither is UBI. It's a way of looking at the future differently in the relationship between your value at work and your income. And those have been tied together out of necessity. And change is difficult, but change is coming.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very well said. Change is difficult, but change is coming. You can't. that's what Tucker Carlson needs to understand. He needs to understand that you can't just legislate into the ground to protect an ancient job now, trucking.
Well, that's true, and we have plenty of examples from history. I mean, we could go back to my grandparents' generation, and they would tell me about having ice delivered to the icebox because they didn't have a refrigerator, and the icebox was the order of the day. So imagine if we wanted to protect those ice delivery and ice chiseling jobs and legislated out that refrigerators couldn't be sold, or because that would destroy an industry. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, and of course it is ridiculous.
Why don't we go back to making horse and buggies, because cars were disruptive to that market? You know what I mean? I mean, if you were a good horse and buggy maker, your only target market nowadays is the Amish. I mean, you lost out, Henry Beachy, right? So yeah, so
Right.
exactly. So you have to live with the change. You have to embrace the change, and you have to have conversations like we're having here at the USTP is having.
Yes.
The conversation has to change, because what all of these people don't understand is that this is only the beginning. It's not an end point. It's not an end. It's not an end. So it's really important, and that's really cool. So
And it's the beginning of new opportunities as well. That's something else. It's not just resisting the future because we want to preserve the past, but we would be ignoring the new opportunities that are coming along. So we could take a look at any previous technology, automobiles, for example. That one keeps coming up. And people can say, well, there are smog issues and traffic crowding issues. But look at the mobility issues. Look at all the other things that it opened up that just would not have been possible before. That's going to be true of these future technologies that are coming along, and we need to shepherd them into the right existence.
exactly. Or talking about your own sort of field, the aircraft, the aviation industry. I mean, the pilots are sort of becoming a thing of the past as well. That they're not signing up en masse because they're having issues with pay and overwork. Getting overworked, especially on these short run trips. Long haul pilots. That's where you want to be. You don't want to be in a short run pilot, but you want to be a long haul pilot, and it's hard to get a long haul pilot pass unless you've been doing it for a long time and you clocked up a lot of hours and a lot of experience and all that. And so, it's cheaper to just run a computer, and the computers have proven themselves. And so pilots, the allure of the sky, it used to be the thing. Everyone wanted to be a pilot in the 60s, but now, I don't know, it's not as attractive anymore. It's just a normal job that a computer could do just as easily, or a warfare pilot. I mean, you can only go up to so many Gs.
Exactly.
It's cheaper, more effective to run a drone, a manless drone, if they shoot it down. Like the Trump drone over Iran was a huge watershed moment in history. Got shot down, and it didn't trigger World War III because there wasn't a pilot in there. But if there was a pilot in that plane doing a spy mission over Iran and it got shot down, the world would look very different today. So there's a benefit in there, sort of. You can sort of calculate a benefit in there, but the order, but pilots are, they're smart people. They'll just find new jobs and new facilities and new opportunities, and maybe spending time in on a beach is more fun anyway. I don't know.
Well, I think it goes back and goes to the point of tying jobs to not only the money that you make, but your prestige or what you do. I mean, when somebody would ask me, especially years ago, and they would say, "So what do you do?" I would say, I do this for the Air Force, or I engineer these kinds of systems for companies. And I would say that sort of thing because I identified with what I did for money to be my chief value to society. But my chief value to society might have been being a father and raising a couple of children and now having some grandchildren. It may be being involved in causes and activities like this. I've jumped in full force. I joined the U.S. Transhumanist Party not long after I found out about it, and lamented the fact that there wasn't an Arizona Transhumanist Party. And at that time, I didn't have the bandwidth to be able to take that on from a startup operation. But when it did get started, I was right in there, and some of my other time freed up. But the point is, when somebody asks you what you do, it doesn't have to say, well, I'm a very successful talk show host. You can say, I bring spotlight on issues that are crucial to society and for the future moving forward. There's a difference.
I totally love this. It's a very Alan Watts. We've got John Kurtz or Carrots, and I call him the Alan Watts of the candidates, which we'll get into in just a sec. But I like this notion of do what you love, and the money will follow. I think this is really, really true. Because you bring value, and bringing value is what capitalism is all about. Once you can bring that value to other people, the money sort of fills in the void, and people become very successful over doing service to others, as opposed to looking to make money because for the sake of making money. They just usually end up working for other people who've already found that, and that's what happens. So tell us more about the Arizona Transhumanist Party very quickly. It sounds exciting. I mean, Ben Zion's the captain or whatever, isn't he?
Yeah, he's the chair. And I started out attending meetings a few months back, and I guess my passion showed through because I'm now the vice chair of the Arizona Transhumanist Party, and I'm taking on the goal of looking to build this. We are now in a political season, and as you mentioned, Ben Zion is the chair of the party, of the Arizona Transhumanist Party, that is. And he's also, as I'm sure all your viewers know, one of the presidential hopefuls for the U.S. Transhumanist Party. So he's been putting a lot of time and interest in that. So it's been a parallel operation. I've been able to get out and talk to people that I know from the transhumanist world, from the immortalist world, for people that are into life extension. And we're slowly growing the party that way. We're having a super longevity group that I'm involved in. We're bringing a couple of the candidates, people that have appeared on your show, will be coming to a Zoom telecast for our particular members. And we're doing one next Monday and one the following Monday. So this all ties in to the excitement, I think, around the Arizona Transhumanist Party.
Yeah, that's really cool. All right, so good luck with the Arizona Transhumanist Party, and hopefully it continues to grow. I hear it's a fairly large already, and it's going to keep getting bigger, so that's good. And you can network with other large entities like the California Transhumanist Party and Newton Lee over there, doing a great job. Absolutely. Over there. That's fantastic. So let's talk about the candidates in the race. How are you liking the race, first of all? What do you reckon?
Well, that is a loaded question. I guess I'll start from the beginning. This will not be a short answer. My apologies in advance. Originally, of course, we know that there were 3 candidates. And so my first goal was to learn about those. I really didn't know Ben. I didn't know Charles, and I didn't know Rachel, and those were the 3 original candidates. And I spent some time researching them. And I must say that not only I was attracted to Ben from a candidate standpoint, not just because he's a local guy, though that does make it convenient, but his campaign slogan is radical life extension is closer than you think. And you've already discovered that radical life extension is very important to me. So at that point, it's like, okay, I want to get to know this guy a little better and see what's going on. And he's got this thing called the Futurist New Deal. And I looked at that, and radical life extension figures in there in each one of the different elements. I made some notes because I didn't want to get lost on that. But the idea that the Wi-Fi for all, the democratizing of information and so forth.
The federal land leases.
The federal land lease, and then, of course, Ben has his own UBI proposal. So I think the more conversation about that, the better. So I immediately thought, well, it's really good that this guy is local. Let me see what else is out there. And I came across Rachel Haywire and started looking at some of the things that she was doing from an artist standpoint, and I found that to be very intriguing. And I thought, well, this is a different way of approaching people. And Ben has been doing, many podcasts, putting videos out there, talking to people. He's been on your show, quite a number of times. He's really getting the word out as far as spreading transhumanism. I thought, well, maybe Rachel had, perhaps, a different way to do this from an artistic standpoint, and I like that idea. And then Charles, I got a chance to meet him, and
he's tall, right?
I met him in person over in Burbank, and he is very tall.
That's what I hear. I hear he's extremely
but I love his
tall.
He is extremely tall, and I love his 222 initiative. He is the social justice candidate. That's my analysis of him, and that shows a side of transhumanism that I really like. He has a tie-in with the California Transhumanist Party, even though Charles is from Florida, and Newton Lee, so that's very credible. So I thought, well, gee, we've got three interesting candidates here. And then, probably not talking out of school, the race got a little rough and bumpy. And I'm continuing to try to make up my mind about these three candidates. And I won't go into all the details. That's probably been rehashed probably on your show here a number of times. And certainly you can read about it in other forums. And the decision was made by Gennady, the U.S. Transhumanist Party chairman, to extend the period of time for campaigning and for voter registration, and when the actual election is going to occur, and the fact that more candidates could enter the race, which tended to make it even more interesting. Because I think we're up to 9, if I have the count correctly, and been reading through some of those. Well, once again, no surprise. When I would read those candidate profiles, the first thing I would look for is, how does this candidate address radical life extension? Radical life extension, out of the 3 core values of the U.S. Transhumanist Party, is core value number 1, happens to be my core value number 1. So I was using that to judge them as well, and to look at, if they don't address radical life extension specifically, then how do their policies affect radical life extension, in my estimation. And I found some that were quite interesting, but I think maybe because Ben is local, Ben's focus is on radical life extension, and I think his supporting platform is very strong for that. I have very unashamedly thrown all my support and campaigning practice in behind Ben Zion. So I truly want Ben Zion to be the one who emerges from this victorious.
All right, so that's an endorsement from you, Mr. Shumaker. Okay, that's breaking news right there. Unless it wasn't breaking news, I don't know, but it's confirmed on this show anyway. So that's interesting. All right, so Ben Zion's got a David Shumaker endorsement. So that's Dan Elton and now David Shumaker officially. And Dr. Dan Elton is an incredibly smart gentleman as well.
Yes, he is.
I appreciated him coming on the show, as well. Talking about medical AI, which is very close to radical life extension. If you want radical life extension, if you can improve the AI sufficiently, eliminating cancer is not that far away with that sort of stuff, because the medical AI will, imaging processes and stuff will pick it up a million times better than a human doctor could, and you can eliminate these sorts of things really, really early. Self-adjusting robots, nanorobots, and all that. They've got those brain worms now that you can put. They're working on neuron cleaners. I mean, a lot of this is really cool stuff emerging in the medical industry there. And I guess if you're into radical life extension, you'd want the best for the medical industry and the AI that's coming out of that. So the two and two go together. So that's very interesting. All right. So
it is, and I want to inject one thing if I can, which is the fact that I love all those things that you pointed out. And some people might look at those and say, well, that sounds like that's a ways off, and we can't forecast when these things will happen. But I want to say that I think that there are nearer term things along that line that may help too. Things like improvements in virtual assistants. That's a technology that's really coming into its own now. Well, sure, it can make my appointments and maybe book some phone calls, but also maybe it can keep my supplement schedule up to
Exactly.
date. Maybe it
Exactly.
can keep my blood testing up to date. That's technology that's real, that's tangible, that you're going to have in your hands, being able to do this right now, and if not right now, very soon.
That's really, really important because, they talk about, the end of antibiotics and stuff like this. And one of the main reasons that some of these diseases are building up antibiotic resistance is simply because a doctor prescribes you a full dose, and people, they take half the dose, and then they get better, and they're like, "Wow, that's fantastic," and
Yes,
they
that's
throw the
right.
rest out because they're thinking
Yes.
arrogantly that they've finished. But what they've done is they've taken half the recommended dose. Now they've given the antibiotic, they've killed enough to make themselves better, but the bacterial infection and that has built up a resistance, and next time it comes back stronger because they didn't actually kill it. Talking about assistant AI or whatever, it will be like, do not flush this down the toilet. Finish your damn dose of your antibiotics. You're
Exactly.
hurting the world doing this, stuff like this.
Get to bed on time. Keep your immune system built up. Not only take your supplements, but whatever eating regimen works well for you. A big part of that is maintaining that. And sure, I can maintain mine on a day-to-day basis when I'm in my local and normal processes. I get up at this time, I do this at this time, I go to work at this time. That's easy. But when I travel, when I have guests, when I do some other things, those can be difficult. And I would love to have my assistant be able to keep me on track and to keep me in check. And it's up to me to not look at that as being pestered by that, but actually being able to help. When I start running low on certain things, for it to start doing the ordering for me. Now, maybe I think of these things because I'm coming from that system engineering background, and we always try to automate business processes to make them quicker, more reliable, less error prone. We're going to be able to do that in our daily lives for ourselves.
And I think logically, I mean, that's the whole point that's what progress is. Once you can enhance actual human life, I think that's where actually we're all trying to go anyway. We're not, the point of humans building giant steel mills or building ships to transport goods across the world isn't because we really wanted to build ships. I mean, some people did, but it's not, building a big commercial infrastructure for whatever. It's not really that. It's because we're trying to service and make our own lives better. And that's the end product, is actually improving our own lives. So if you can get rid of the steel mill and you can get rid of the ships because the cost is so reduced, and you can 3D print it and you can do all that other stuff.
Yes.
And you can take a lot of pressure off nature, which then also improves our own lives. And there's instead of a negative feedback loop, you get a positive feedback loop where we're getting improved lives, improved healthcare outcomes, better living conditions, and we take pressure off the global environment and other resource depleting arenas. I mean, this sounds like a win-win to me.
It definitely is a win-win, and it comes by embracing the technologies, by seeing that they get used appropriately, by seeing that whatever concerns come up, say, from privacy issues or anything along that line, anything that would impact it as far as how it could be used out there, all goes back to having conversations, talking about it in forums like this, talking about it at the grocery store, talking about it at the PTA meeting, talking about it, wherever you can, because that goes back to your point of how do we put pressure on people that are interested in maintaining the status quo, maybe for financial reasons. That can certainly happen in capitalism or in other economic models. But also, people were resistant to change. So sometimes there's that wanting to just stay with what we know and not go with something that's new. And this goes to my point, is that we need to embrace the future because of all these things that will come from it, that will make ourselves better, We'll make the environment better. And I want to be around for a good long time, but I'm still also interested in making this better for my daughter, my granddaughter, their granddaughters, and so on. So it is that feedback loop that you're talking about that drives us forward and drives my excitement about this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all your kind words and your insights. It's been really cool. It's been a great honor. I've been looking forward to having you on for a while now, and radical life extension is important, and it begins, I guess, in the mind. When people change their minds on radical life extension, and they start to think that they want to do it. I mean, it's kind of interesting that people go to the doctor when they're sick and they say, "Oh, I hate being sick." And then they're healthy and they kind of forget about the fact that they were ever sick, and then they stop, pushing in that arena. Or it takes a tragic event or something for people to actually get involved in medicine, and or they push through there because of family. My dad was a doctor, therefore I must be a doctor or something. I mean,
yes,
really, it takes we're just talking about changing your mind and understanding that if you talk about it and do it and act on it, and if you're an investor, if you have, if you like mutual funds or something, picking the right set of mutuals. I mean, if you pick the right set of mutual funds, you can make a huge impact. There's a lot of, businesses out there that are screaming for capital, screaming for cash that could assist in these fields. And the American population between, I don't know, 55 and 70 is the most capital rich population on the planet. I mean, if you all shifted 5% of your portfolio, I mean, that would make a huge difference. For example, I mean, there's multiple ways to do this stuff, and it just takes a little bit of creative thinking, a little bit of ingenuity, a little bit of Charles Holsopple is saying, okay, let's do it through a non-for-profit organization. You can't just sit back and rely on politicians and billionaires to do it all for you, because they're running their own games. And a lot of people say, I don't trust the politicians anyway. So then why trust them? Why give over such important topics to them in this arena? You know what I mean? If you don't trust them, then why aren't you helping to change the conversation and move it towards a more positive outcome? I mean, it's amusing to me.
Well, that's exactly right. And it does go back to the conversation. And it does mean staying engaged, and it does mean doing shows like this. It does mean collaborating. The Arizona Transhumanist Party is small by comparison to any of the other political parties that are here. So wherever we can make liaisons, wherever we can have an opportunity to speak and be heard, is something that we want to do. And I think we see this, across the board in the U.S. Transhumanist Party. After all, this whole presidential race in the U.S. Transhumanist Party is really all about making these things high profile. It's not realistically putting somebody in the Oval Office. It's a matter of being able to say, hey, I'm running for president. These are the things that I'm interested in. These are the things that the future is bringing towards us. And getting some airtime and getting people to look at that. We saw that quite a bit back in 2016. That was done masterfully, I think, with the coffin bus driving around the U.S.
Absolutely.
And we're going to do something like this again in 2020, not the coffin bus, obviously, but as far as getting the word out and using the technology, that's available.
Well, I noticed that Ben Zion released some sort of 10-step plan, and in there he formulated some sort of idea about, having a committee to come up with a coffin bus type viral campaign, as part of a strategy. So, we'll see what the other candidates do on that, but that's some positive forward thinking, about the virality. I mean, this party has attracted, different organizations and different people and different profiles from all over the spectrum, political spectrum, media spectrum, and others. So, and the amount of, Janani's really smart. I mean, and so is Zoltan Itzvan for launching this, because the amount of free labor that they extract is tens of thousands of hours. Because it's a political process. So you have to, when it's politics, because I love politics, I'm really into politics. It's probably my favorite thing. Yeah, it's tens of thousands of hours of free labor and thinking in a really dynamic way, which includes, basically all the systems and all the processes and all the world issues that we talk about here as sort of fodder for a larger program, and it's sort of invites the best and the worst, but the best of what people have to offer. Otherwise, they get left in the ideological dust. And I really think that's kind of really, really clever what they've done there, because the amount of free labor is just enormous that they've extracted, and ideas and creativity that they can get from a simple thing like a party.
Yes, that's right. People don't think anything of that as far as when it comes to politics, donating time, making phone calls, going door to door, talking, presenting. Yeah, you're exactly right as far as being able to do that in a political setting. One of the other things I want to point out, too, is I love the fact that politics has its seasons. And, of course, right now we're going into a political season here in the U.S., so people will jump in for the season and dedicate their time to that. People will pay attention to what's going on because it's that season. And I like the philosophy of transhumanism, but that's kind of an everyday thing. And so you have books and you have videos and you have other ways to communicate. And those are great, and they can create a little splash around their start. But there's something about the political season. I mean, you can almost equate it to something like the holiday season, the Christmas season, where people know it's coming, and people get prepared for it, and people get into it, and people get excited about it, and you go through that process. Well, the political season is that way as well. And whatever you think of the political season, whatever you think of the candidates, it's pretty hard not to have a conversation about that. So it's a great time to be talking transhumanism.
Absolutely. Thank you, David. Is there any final comments you'd like to say? You know who the type of people who watch this show. Anything you want to say to any of those people, or final comments, or anything about Radfest or any of your longevity? Anything you want to say before we leave?
Well, I'm very thankful to be here on this stage where so many of my heroes have been. You mentioned Jose Cordero earlier, and Charlie Cam, another hero of mine, was here on your show, and then so many more that I am just pleased to share the same stage and to be able to talk directly about those things. Also, I want to say that I've been really pleased to watch the videos that Ben Zion has put out with many of these same people. Natasha Vita-Moore, for example, Joe Bardeen, who wrote a chapter in the Transhumanist Handbook. But matter of fact, he's doing this whole project where he's trying to spend some time with each one of the people that wrote in that book. And there's like 60-some chapters. So this is a great cross-section of the whole transhumanist movement. But being able to get out there and to have these videos and to be able to share in the excitement and to start painting that possibility of what the future can be like. And it doesn't have to be like Terminator.
No.
As a matter of fact, it's in our power to make it what we want it to be. And I can see it becoming a very great future and a very long future for those who want that sort of thing.
Absolutely, that's profound, and thank you so much. And I absolutely agree. Well, if I ever have one of those guys on again, I must get you on, and then we can all have a chat. So that would be fantastic. All right, David.
I would love that.
yeah. I'll see if I can order those. I think Charlie Cam would definitely be up for something like that. Charlie's a very very lovely person. So.
He is. He's marvelous.
Incredibly intelligent. So yeah, it's fantastic. All right, so thank you, David Shumaker. It's been an absolute honor to have you on. I hope we'll see you next week at the debate. Debate's going to be really good. I'll try and organize something there, but it's going to be really really fantastic, and it's going to be huge. So I think it's next week. Anyway, as we said, I think it's next week, but we're going to wait for Chairman Gennady to sort that out.
Absolutely. Thank you again.
All right, that's it for Detonation. Thanks for everyone for watching Detonation. All more coming all your way all this week. Detonation.